I'm John Dass, the Director of Dedicated Accident Solicitors. I'm recognised by the Association of Personal Injury Lawyers as a National Asbestos Disease Specialist, and I'm also a mesothelioma patron to the British Lung Foundation. Norman Maddox was exposed to asbestos whilst he worked as a lab technician at International Combustion in Derby. He was required to work upon boiler components which were lagged with asbestos, and that work was also undertaken in power stations where further exposure to asbestos occurred. Mr. Maddox was given no verbal or written warnings as to the dangerous nature of being exposed to asbestos, and neither was he given any personal protective equipment or ventilation or extraction equipment to remove the asbestos from the vicinities in which he worked. Highly unfortunately, Mr. Maddox developed mesothelioma, which is a highly aggressive and incurable form of lung cancer, which in the vast majority of cases is associated with being exposed to asbestos. Very sadly, within 3 months of being diagnosed, Mr. Maddox passed away. Within a period of 3 months, we were able to settle the claim on behalf of Mr. Maddox's widow.
Well, we think Mr. Maddox was exposed to asbestos when he worked for International Combustion Limited in Derby when he was very young. He was working in the laboratories but going to power stations and in the works where asbestos was being cut. We actually trusted your employer to protect you from anything that was too dangerous. When Norman was diagnosed with an asbestos-related illness, they told us it was slightly more rare than asbestosis, and he had mesothelioma, which was caused by asbestos because there were plaques between the lung and the lung sac. April he was diagnosed. By the middle of May he suddenly went very, very much worse. He collapsed halfway through our Spanish holiday and spent most of the second week in bed with help from a doctor. And when he came home, by the middle of June, he was rushed into hospital. 1 week later, he went into a hospice, and he only lasted 3 weeks in the hospice. Norman's illness came as a big shock because he was a big, as we thought, healthy, outgoing, fun-loving, golf-playing man. It devastated the family, the fact that he'd got a terminal illness. When Norman had died about 2.5 years, we were Skyping a cousin in South Africa who'd actually gone online to catch up with his Derbyshire, and he'd seen an article about a gentleman in Australia who'd had mesothelioma and worked for combustion. So Malcolm said, "Didn't Norman work for combustion?" And I said, "Well, yes, when we were younger." And he said, "Well, I'm sending you the article." I read the article and I thought, I've got to find out, I've got to know for sure. So I phoned Dedicated Accident Solicitors, and that's when I started to find out exactly what we could do to help. Dedicated Accident Solicitors had precisely 3 months to sort it out before the 3-year cut-off. And I thought, well, at least if I get an apology or something, some proof that these people had done this to him, get some justice for Norman. But in actual fact, they went above and beyond and were absolutely brilliant for me and for Norman. If I had a problem, I could phone. There was always someone who would explain to me what was happening, and if anything happened, they got back to me straight away to say, this has happened and it's going forward and now we're going to do this. I don't think they could have been more approachable or more helpful. And the settlement of the case and the win, it has actually astounded us by the size of it, but it means we could put money in the bank for anything necessary that I would not have had to pay for because my husband would have done it, and I'm hoping it will help the whole family in the future. If I found or heard of anyone else in a similar situation, I would urge them most strenuously to contact John Dass of Dedicated Accident Solicitors immediately, because they would not get a better solicitor or solicitors firm to help them through this.